Even as the memory of the original Vancouver Grizzlies becomes as faded as the buffed-out logo on the hardwood court used at Wednesday's NBA preseason game between Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns and Jay Triano and his Toronto Raptors, the potential return of the NBA to the west coast of Canada does merit consideration. Now, it won't get as much consideration as it would if there were an NBA team truly in play and available for relocation. But because there are teams that could very well fall into that category in the next 2 to 3 years, it is a reasonable talking point. My personal bias around Vancouver deserving a second shot at the NBA runs from my more than 2.5 years in the NBA, including a stint as a Grizzlies executive in their first 2 years in 1995 and 1996. So let's put that out there right at the tip-off. The first factor to consider is that Vancouver is a very different place than it was back in April of 1995 when the Grizzlies took to the court for the first time. It has grown significantly as a city. It has a much larger corporate and media infrastructure than it did 15 years ago at the dawn of the internet era. And it has something called Vancouver 2010 under its belt. The second factor is that the NBA is also a very different place. It's a much more international league today, thanks in large part to Commissioner David Stern's global marketing strategy, where now more people watch the NBA playoffs outside of the U.S. than domestically. There are players from Europe, Africa, South America, and from Asia, a key for a Pacific Gateway city like Vancouver. Yet despite the fact that both Vancouver and the NBA are more natural partners in 2010 than they were back in '95, there is still one factor above all that would determine success for a return of the hardwood to British Columbia, and that is ownership and franchise infrastructure. The NBA would work here in Vancouver again, in my view, but only if it were part of a multiple franchise umbrella, such as Canucks Sports Entertainment, which owns both the NHL Canucks and Rogers Arena. At worst, there'd need to be a strong strategic partnership with the Canucks to make it work. The original Grizzlies were born that way with Orca Bay, but the moment they were ripped from that corporate womb, they were doomed against not only the 65-cent dollars of the time, but higher rental costs, narrower revenue streams, and the U.S. ambitions of Michael Heisley. Vancouver would also be better off in an NBA in which Seattle was back in full stead. So there's reason for optimism around the return of the NBA to Vancouver from a sport business and a basketball business point of view, but likely not until Seattle rolls out new arena plans to at least set the stage for a rebirth there as well.